What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 6 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. Matt, what's going on in Ohio today?
Just off to the official start of the college season. So excited. We got plenty of stuff to talk about.
Absolutely.
What's new with you?
Matt, I was at you guys have seen what's new with me on Twitter and Instagram. I've been going off. I went to the UFC last weekend. I think I got my contract pretty close to being done. I think I have a fight picked out. I think everything is good.
So when will you have an idea? Do you have an idea when?
Yeah, I have an idea, but they like releasing that stuff first. We're a couple months out still, but it's not going to take me too long. You know, I was worried about I thought there was a 4-month USADA wait period, and apparently for new guys it's only 1 month, so that's really nice.
Because you still have to be in the system, right? The USADA system,
only for 1 month though.
Okay.
So it's really good that I was training for Midlands because my weight is down. I'm in pretty good shape. You know, I'm not in great shape yet, but obviously I still have 2 months till Midlands approximately. And
so are you still going to do it? That's what everybody wants to know.
I'm trying to work it into the contract. We'll see. We're going to see what happens here. It's gonna be close. So, hey, let's get into this. I love, because you kind of mentioned this, and I love this topic. But we had a new National Wrestling Hall of Fame class come out. And one of those in there was Rich Lorenzo, who I know was a big mentor to you. So, obviously I've had 3 or 4 or 5 really good mentors that have kind of made me who I am in wrestling. And I think probably anyone listening to this podcast has had at least a few of those. And that's why they love the sport of wrestling. So let's hear a little bit more about Rich, because I don't know that much about him.
Yeah, so Coach, he's like the Godfather of Penn State wrestling. That's the best way to describe him. He was the head coach for Penn State for about 15 years, late 70s, 80s, early 90s, and he's the one that really brought Penn State back into the forefront and into the college discussion. And he did it in a very unique way. You know, during the era when he was the head coach at Penn State, there was within the entire athletic department, they talked about this grand experiment that had been laid out by Joe Paterno, which was basically saying that you can have everything in your student athlete experience. You can be a national champion. You can be an academic All-American. You can have a great college experience and be set up and prepared to have the professional success that we want every one of our student athletes to experience. And he was fundamental in introducing that balance. I know even in this day and age, parents at a young age and a lot of college coaches think, hey, your only goal here in the next 4 or 5 years is to be focused on winning a national champ.
Well, I think that's
national championship.
Shifting a little bit. I know in my time in Missouri, I helped put in a program called the Total Person Program. I was a part of the student athletic committee, and we put that into place. And that was, one of the big things was that, and maybe Missouri was a leader in this. I don't know, but this is 2006 and 7, so it is a few years back now. But essentially, a lot of athletes struggle a lot, and this is kind of what you're talking about. When they're done with their athletic career, whether it's in high school or college or the Olympics or professionally, they struggle with what's next. And obviously, as you know, life doesn't have the same structure that, say, a wrestling team or football team or whatever would have. And so a lot of athletes struggle with that. So University of Missouri put a program into place to help assist those athletes getting done with their college careers. Kind of sounds like what you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Rich Lorenzo was a forebearer to that. And, he had a formative experience in my coaching development, in my philosophy, and my just my overview as a coach. And I think what you're seeing right now is one of the things that he was able to do. A lot of times we just focus on the wrestling experience and not the life experience that goes into the whole aspect of being a college athlete. And I think one of the things that you have to do is constantly point out these things. I'm sure you can point to things that Coach Smith said to you that were outside of wrestling on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
To think holistically instead of just individually. And I think approaching wrestling with this holistic approach, saying that we can have all these things, it actually helps you when you have to make that transition off the mat into real life. Yeah. when you've been taught and structured and been in an environment where someone is talking about those things on a daily basis, you are more prepared once you get into life. And I think that's one of the great things Rich Lorenzo did at Penn State. Obviously, I think this is long overdue. I mean, he doesn't get a lot of credit because he was a man that wasn't about seeking individual credit for himself. But what he did at Penn State over the course of 15 years, he led Penn State to 11 top 10 finishes.
Wow.
He led Penn State to 6 top 5 finishes. He was had the first team to actually go into Carver Hawkeye Arena and defeat Dan Gable and the Hawkeyes for the first time in Carver Hawkeye. So he won, I think, 2 national duels titles.
Okay.
In an era where every top team was wrestling in the national duels, not like the formerly disbanded national duels, but he won 2 national duel titles when legitimately every power program was in there. So he was also the executive director for the NWCA. So his reach and his impact on the sport of wrestling has been huge. And
well, he said the president of NWCA, which I don't want to steal your thunder, but that can lead us into our next topic. And maybe Rich might not be happy, but Matt, I want to cancel the All-Star Classic. Is that too? Am I being too extreme here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, when you have what's supposed to be your premier All-Star match, when there's not really a match that you can really highlight and said this is a feature match that the whole country wants to see. There wasn't one of those.
There wasn't
even 10 men's matches that were wrestled.
There was 5.
There was 5.
Holy moly! Right?
Yeah.
I kind of like. I didn't even realize this, Matt, until it happened. I thought, I seen announcements here and there, and then I saw the gross. Oh my God, who is gross face from NC State?
Wilson from NC State.
Wilson. I saw that canceled, and I think a day before or whatever, I went to look it up, and I'm like, I can only find 5 matches. Like, where's the rest of them? This is freaking weird. Like, am I missing something? I thought maybe the website was broke. I went through everything, and then I realized I don't think I'm missing it. I think there's only 5 matches. That's all there really is. So I mean, like, where do you? So I guess what the problem is having is someone like a Penn State, a Cale Saracen, refuses to go. Right? Obviously, Cale, if he's selected to go, he'd probably have at least 5 guys in this, maybe 6 potentially. But no one is choosing to go to this really. Besides, I guess Tom Ryan sent a few guys.
Yeah, and I think there's a variety of factors when coaches are deciding who they're going to actually put into the meet. Thinking from a coach's perspective, and when we're a fan, we're thinking, hey, give us the 10 best matchups we can possibly see. Give us, from a consumer standpoint, this is what we want to watch, so give it to us. But on the coaching side of things, there's the opportunity for your athlete to be injured, right?
Yeah.
Before the season even starts, you face the potential injury and a big hole in your lineup. So there's a consideration in that. There's also, I think in the past, there weren't a lot of marketing platforms to really promote your program. So previously,
makes sense.
Yeah. So previously, it's like, hey, if we want to build a platform and gain recognition for my program, let's put these guys in this feature match to get a high level of recognition. Now, with all the other media platforms out there, with Flow and with Track and some of the things we're doing, there's a lot more accessibility to build out your programs. And then you've got, say, the Big Ten Network, where you've got individual platforms. So
I mean, we're seeing things honestly, Matt, and hopefully I don't get my ADHD kicked in and switch to a different topic, but honestly, when something isn't on video, like I was, for example, I was looking for matches from the Harold Nichols Open. When it's not on video, you're kind of like, what the heck? Why can't I watch these matches? And so, anymore today, it's more the rule that it's on video than the exception. Whereas, to your point, and maybe for some of our younger listeners that don't get it, like, when I was in college, and I know especially prior to that, everybody went to the All-Star Classic. That was like, it was a really big deal to get invited. And if you got invited, you went. I mean, that's how I remember it being. and even a few years past my collegiate career. So I don't know really when this idea of, we're not going. I know the last few years have been down, but this year seems like excessively down in comparison to anything prior to this.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was intentional from the NWCA to only do a 5-5 split between men and women, or if they couldn't actually field 10 matches for the entire dual meet. Yeah, I'm not sure what that was, but to not be able to actually introduce 10 quality matches was a little bit disappointing. I think the other challenges with this format is, one, technically, and I say technically, Ben, because it's technically supposed to be an exhibition match.
Well, it doesn't count.
It's not.
It doesn't
Yeah,
count.
but it does, right? As much as they want to say,
no, it doesn't though.
No,
you remember, what was the one?
It affects the rank. It affects the rankings.
Okay,
it.
But what was the one a few years back where there was, and I'm blanking on who it was now. There was a match in the All-Star, and it would have affected seeding, right? It would have made the seeds of NCAAs different, but they totally discounted it, so it didn't. And a lot of people were pissed about that because they said, "Hey, most people think a match is a match. Who cares if it was exhibition at NWCA All-Star?" But they did not
to break. Yes. So technically, that's only one formula. That's only one piece of the component that goes into the seeding criteria for the NCAA tournament. That's, your actual season record form, which wouldn't show up, say, if you and I wrestled, you won the exhibition match.
It wouldn't show up on records.
It wouldn't show up on record. But when there's a coach's ranking, when it gets down to it, you can't remove that from the equation. As much as you say, well, this is an exhibition match between you and I, but everybody knows back in the first week of November, you beat me at the All-Star Classic. So people were like, if there's a tiebreaker to go in there, like, well, there was a head-to-head. They actually did wrestle, and this guy won. So as a coach, I'm going to give that criteria to the guy that won in the exhibition match. The other thing
go ahead.
The other thing that I have a problem with is this is an exhibition match, yet they actually have to make scratch weight, which doesn't seem logical to me.
I mean, I think the Gross Wilson was going to be at what you call it, a catch weight at like 135, I believe. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessary to make guys make weight this early in the season. And I guess when we're talking about early in the season, the other thing that you haven't mentioned yet is that when you're getting your guys ready, we're talking about peaking guys for a season. Having guys ready to wrestle the best guy in the country the first weekend in November, that's not really ideal. Can you do it? Sure, but it's definitely not ideal. And I do remember, this is the other thing I was going to bring up when I was talking about in the past. Matt, what year was it switched from the middle of the season to the beginning of the season? Because for a long period of time, I think even during portion of my college career, this was a mid-season event, not an early year event. Correct?
Right, which I think there's merits to that. I mean, you get, you can take 2 months and get your guys' bodies and minds ready for a high-level match and get prepared to that. Like, there's a lot of variables at this time of the year that a lot of people don't think about. I mean, as a college coach, like one of the biggest takeaways you're looking for in the month of November, outside of results, is are we getting all of our guys' weight stabilized where they can comfortably turn around week in and week out and make weight? And that takes a period of adjustment. I would say typically 4 or 5 weigh-ins is the acclimation period to get your weight guys stabilized. So to have your first weigh-in, 1 hour weigh-in, be turn around and you're facing the guy you faced in the national finals or another All-American, it's like, and you're not at your best when a lot of these guys really haven't competed since last March and they're not battle tested yet. Do you really want to throw them in to this situation that they're not ideally prepared for? So I think there were some merits to whenever the format was in the mid-season All-Star match to make it more feasible, more attractive, not only for the athlete, but for the college coach to pull the trigger and say, hey, this is a good idea for my guy. This is a training opportunity and a competition opportunity that's not only good for the masses and good for the sport of wrestling, but also it's good for my individual athlete at this point in time in the season.
Yeah. So okay. So what you're the president of NWCA tomorrow. What are you doing? Are you moving this event? Are you canceling this event? Are you going to Kale and begging, saying, what do I have to do to get your guys there? I mean, I for what it's worth, Iowa didn't send anyone either. Oklahoma State sent someone. Who would be the other? Missouri. I don't believe they sent anyone. They had a duel.
Ohio State had
Ohio
McKenna,
State sent someone. Oklahoma State sent.
but they didn't have Martin. They didn't have Colin Moore. They didn't have guys that could possibly Micah Jordan. They
Micah
didn't
Jordan.
have four other guys that could possibly be represented.
And you can really see how I don't know if you watched McKenna the next day against Navy, Matt, but he really struggled to win that match. And I got to think part of it was making weight, wrestling, flying over, and it was the next day, correct?
Yeah, without a doubt. And those are all those considerations that coaches take into account before they actually pull the trigger. So
what are you doing? Are you canceling it? What are you going to do? What's your first step?
No, and this is always the struggle about the growth and betterment of the sport as opposed to what's best for the individual program, right? And at the end of the day, you're hired as a head coach to deliver a winning product. Yes. You're not hired to put guys in an all-star match, in an exhibition match that's really not going to affect your coach and your program's individual assessment at the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
So as much as I know these college coaches are receptive, they know this is an important event for the sport of wrestling. They know that we need to see the best guys competing against each other. But when push comes to shove, the coach is always going to do what's best for his individual athlete and for the betterment of his program. And I think having it at the beginning of the year with strict guidelines on you have to make scratch weight, you have to follow 1 hour weigh-ins, and a lot of these guys, if we want to have these exhibition matches, if a guy's going up from 141 to 149 and he's got to turn around in a week and make weight, he's got to be at, say, 143 to be at the 1.5% rule that you can come down to for your next weigh-in. So I think when you're introducing those type of scenarios, it's not as easy to say, hey, let's get the 20 best guys.
Yeah. Hey, so Matt, I'm just gonna throw this out there. I just looked this up. The last 2 years were, I would say, they would be what you'd say a little bit down. But both the last 2 years, so 16 and 17, the 2 years prior to this, they had full lineups. They even had more. And in 16, they had about eight exhibition bouts, right? But they had a 184 as a 1 versus 2, Dean versus Miles. They had a 2 versus 4, 2 versus 3. Jordan versus Lewis, 2 versus 3, Mays versus Kalka, 4 versus 3. So this is most of the matches in 16 were top 4 guys against each other. Then if you go to 17, it slips a little bit, right? But you still have the number 1 versus number 2, Zahid Valencia, Mark Hall, which is a big one. And then you had the national champ at 97. You had Machiavello. You have Pantaleo, who's really highly ranked. You got Jack versus Meredith, which is 2 top 5 guys. Cruz versus Piccinini, same thing. Gross versus Mitchell, same thing. So, it's really just this year that's a huge drop-off. And I was trying to think of when it happened. And obviously, these aren't all marquee matchups. I think if you look 10 or 12 years ago, I think what you'd find is they're almost all number 1s versus numbers 2. But really, even 16 and 17 were really good compared to this year, which is 2018. So I don't know what happened. It's crazy.
So I don't know if the actual geographic location affected this.
I found the historical document here, Matt, on WrestleStats. It gives every single year of results. Oh, I'm going to look back now. All right, 2004. Oh yeah, these are premier matchups: Lee versus Jane, Moore versus Ware, Gentry, Percival, Lewis, King, Pendleton, Lang. These are almost all number 1s versus number 2s. Kind of across the board.
So and being a competitor, being an athlete, they want those opportunities, right?
Yeah. So you would think. Wow.
So it'd be interesting. It seems like this year's more of an outlier
Yeah. So
as opposed
2005, Matt, 2005 is when it switched to being before the season. So 2004 and prior were usually like the first weekend in February is what it looks like.
Gotcha.
Interesting. And so
So
looking through these dates too, even when they switched to prior to the year, it was usually late November as opposed to early November. I didn't see 16 and 17 what those dates were. But
yeah,
obviously,
so historically, it's been an amazing event, a very fan-friendly event, delivering
huge, yes.
matchups that everybody wants to see. So, I guess we need to have some conversation to see if there's any anything outside of the norm that was affecting the decisions of a lot of these coaches and athletes not to participate in the event this year. But
Yeah, for
yeah, I mean, historically, it's always been a great event. I think just one bad outing, one bad year is not reflective of the overall product. So, what do we have to do to get colleges and get programs and individuals reengaged with this premier event?
I didn't realize that Ironside versus Colette was at the All Star. I didn't realize. I thought it was a dual meet because essentially it was a home dual meet because it was at Iowa City, 1996. One of the best matches of all time, right? Do you recall that match?
Of all time,
Of
yes.
all time. Awesome freaking match. Ironside versus Colette. It is on YouTube. I know you guys can go check that out. Kind of totally off topic, but yeah. Matt, I'm looking through some of these old years, Matt, and they are just like marquee matchups. And that's me. And, I didn't really start watching college wrestling until the early 2000s. And that's me knowing these guys, knowing that, Sammy Henson versus Eric Aiken, Alan Fried versus Steve Marinetti, Sean Charles versus Tony. Like, these are all-time legendary matchups here at the All-Star Classic.
Yep.
Wow.
No, I mean, we've been treated to some just fantastic opportunities. Unfortunately, in the archives of things, it's hard to actually see these things
Yeah.
with a lot of these other.
It'd be awesome if we had film of all of these events. So, I think to your point, one of the, you said this, and it wasn't even something that I had considered prior to you saying is that, before, say, 15 years ago, this was an event that was covered by every media outlet. There's probably even some film on it when there wasn't really film on anything else. And so it was a great opportunity to get your program and get your athletes seen and get them recognition. Whereas today, like we're talking about, almost every single event is, on some form of video or streaming or whatever it is. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
and all these big time BCN conference, they have their own conference television
Yes.
sites. You have the Big 10 network, you have the SEC network, you have the Big 12 network. You have all these platforms to grow your brand. So, yeah, the opportunity to get exposed at this one individual meet where there's not a lot of individual attention or marketing or promotion that went behind this year's event, it doesn't seem as necessary to place one of your athletes in this situation when it's not the ideal competition scenario.
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, let's move forward. I know we have a lot of wrestling to talk about, and we're gonna get right into the matches. Man, there wasn't a lot of hugely highly ranked matches in this week one of wrestling. So, you and I picked a couple that we got on our list here. So the first one I want to talk about was Will Lewan versus Alec Pantelio. It was at the Michigan State Open, and so I watched that match. And then, Matt, I did further research, and I didn't realize these two guys had wrestled twice in wrestle-offs. They split matches in the wrestle-offs too, and I did not find video of that. But in the Michigan State Open, Will Lewan, so a true freshman, Will Lewan beats senior Alec Pantelio, and for what it's worth here, Matt. It was one of those matches where it was 8-8 going to overtime, but it wasn't really fair, even in my estimation, And I don't want to take anything away from Lewan because obviously beating the wrestle also, but Patelio's in on a takedown in the first period, and somehow, I don't know how he fell to his freaking back. It was impossible. He gives up 4 right off the bat, okay, in the first, say, 15 seconds. The rest of the match, prior to overtime, he gets 3 takedowns, and all Lewan gets is 3 escapes and 1 penalty hands to the face point. So,
Which we have to talk about.
Okay,
Worst rule in the history of wrestling.
So
worst rule in the history of wrestling.
I can,
and that's a big statement. I know that.
That is a very, very large statement. So I'm gonna listen. Usually I'm the rash one, Matt, but you're being quite rash today. I am gonna withhold judgment for I'm gonna give it a month or two because here's, in my estimation, here's what's gonna happen, right? Everyone's going to think like you do, and the coaches are going to bitch so much, and they're going to be so angry about it. The referees will totally stop calling it, and we'll forget about it, right? I think that's one possibility that happens. The other possibility that happens is people are so scared of the rule, they don't touch the head at all, right? Because there was a handful of calls. I probably saw 10 of them this weekend, and I didn't watch 100 matches. I probably watched 30 matches, right? I probably saw 10 of these calls, so it was very frequently. But people will be so scared, they won't even touch the forehead because some of the forehead is getting called. So they'll just stop doing it altogether, and they'll adapt and evolve. I think those are two things that happens.
Yes. So let's step back and let's inform the viewers what this rule actually is. So the hands in the face rule basically says you can only make contact with your opponent above his eyebrow to the top of his head.
Yes.
Any contact made with an open palm below the eyebrow to the chin at the bottom of your face automatically is a one point. So 1 point penalty.
And to your point, it is stupid, right?
And this isn't just on your feet.
No,
it's in any position. Yes. Top, bottom, neutral. Well, everything's in play.
Yeah, at the Buffalo duel, I don't recall which wrestler it was. One of the Buffalo guys got called for raking the face twice. They had a leg in. You know how to leg in? You kind of scoop the face.
141 with Lantry.
Is that who it was? Yeah. And he got called for scooping the face twice. And actually Moran got called for hands to the face. So in that one match, there was 3 hands to the face points. Man, that was crazy. So
and we've had different rules that have really stretched wrestling, like the out of bounds rule and how refs are interpreting that. And I think there's a period of adjustment during the first month of the season where each week the NCAA rules committee is revisiting these new rule changes, and they kind of tweak them throughout the year to make sure that they make logical sense. They're being called the right way because a lot of this is very discretionary.
And everyone needs to be on the same page because you don't want one ref calling it one way and another ref calling it completely different. That's going to F everyone up.
Right. But I mean, what is the first thing you're taught in wrestling? What is the first tie-up you're taught in wrestling?
Collar tie.
A collar tie. You're making contact to the head. That is the first thing we teach a kid outside of stance and motion when we're starting to get a tie-up position. It's grabbing your opponent's head with your collar tie. That builds into all your hand fighting and all your other different setups. So essentially you're saying that one of the most fundamental positions that we teach an athlete from 5 years old and up, you no longer can do that.
Wait, I'm saying, wait, you can collar tie them.
I know, but I'm saying how many times
tie? Is that what you're saying? You post
right. Okay. If you go post collar tie or just go to a straight up collar tie, how many times do you actually hit a part of your opponent's face before you transition into the collar tie? Yeah. Or if you do post and palm to a collar tie, it's the same thing.
Yeah, because you want something on them first. You don't want to just reach up for their collar tie because that's going to leave you exposed. You would never just reach straight to the collar tie, I wouldn't imagine. Yeah, I mean, I agree. And the other thing that's so weird about this is, it's not the guy touching the other guy, right? The guy with his hand out, the guy who's going to get penalized. It's not always his fault. If the other guy moves his face a little bit, or comes up or comes down or whatever, I mean, or, maybe he posts his hand and it was a little lower and it comes up and hits him in the face. It's like there's so many scenarios at which this is totally ridiculous to be called. But I really think you go back to my premise is that people are going to be so scared. Coaches are going to lose their damn mind and refs will stop calling it completely, or people are going to be so scared of being penalized because this 1 point, for the most part, it almost equals a takedown, Matt. Because if you go takedown escape, that's a +1. So you're telling me a touching hand to the face is worthy of essentially a takedown, which we don't see that many of at a high level? That's crazy talk.
Yeah, I was talking about that with a close coaching friend of mine, and he said the same thing. It's like all of a sudden, like you're negating the value of a takedown and how difficult a takedown against two high-level guys is to attain. I mean, that's a difficult thing. Sometimes it takes minutes to create a good setup and one good attack.
A whole match possibly.
And then all of a sudden, like, you could have spotted this guy 2 points, essentially 2 takedowns, because you put 2 hands in the face.
Yeah.
So,
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the notes that I had written down. A lot of times in this first month of the season, when you're trying to hone things in, you're stabilizing your weight, you're building your baseline conditioning, you're working on the technical things that you've been focusing in the room. A lot of this first month is making adjustments week in and week out to these new rules, and that's got to be one of them. I'm sure every coach that competed this weekend had at least one of their athletes called for hands in the face.
Absolutely.
So your job as a coach is okay, how do we adapt and respond to this rule? How do we have to, without just throwing your entire system out, because you can't change.
Hands to the forehead is so, to your point, it's so fundamental.
So do you think this is almost a way to think about it? It's like the Zane Rutherford rule, right?
What do you mean?
Like
in freestyle?
Yeah.
But in freestyle, here's the difference for me. In freestyle, generally speaking, I'm not saying every time, they'll at least give you a few warnings first.
Right.
This one, it was like in the Tristan Moran match, it was like 8 seconds in, Tristan touches his face, penalty point. And you're like, boom, wait, where did that come? What? It was
digging myself out of hole.
There wasn't any warning. There wasn't anything. It was just point right away, And so I think it could be a lot more accepted if there was a warning. In freestyle, there's at the very least one warning, possibly a couple warnings. But and sometimes, and it's got to be slightly discretionary, because there is, like I said, there's so many things that can happen that would cause your hand to go in their face without you really meaning to put it there.
And the thing about rules like this, it's so subjective. It's completely in the hands of the official. And I'm a big proponent, like, hey, let the wrestlers decide the match. If the best refs are the ones that you don't even know are there, right?
Yes.
That's when as a coach or you as an athlete, like, I didn't even know this guy was on the mat. But he was able to manage the mat. He was able to keep action flowing. But essentially, he's not there. Now, all of a sudden, you're infusing refs into the outcome of a match. Yeah. And you're implementing their discretion into a potential outcome of a match, which could have seeding implications, ranking implications, you name it. So I think any rule that's subjective in nature is always difficult to digest. But I will say that the NCAA typically does revisit this on a week in and week out basis. And I imagine, Ben, to your point, I would imagine in the coming weeks, there'll be a new interpretation. There are 2 warnings before a penalty point is issued, similar to like stalling.
Yes, that would be I think that would be much more acceptable. Hey, let me get into one more rule.
Okay.
That now, and it was kind of at the college level now, but I heard the FRL guys, Willie and CP, were talking about it. That it's being pushed at the high school level, and I saw it a handful of times, Super 32. And I want to just give a quick explanation on why this rule is completely ridiculous. Is that okay with you, Matt?
Sure.
Okay, so the rule says you can't push or pull someone out of bounds, right? And so for me, the push, when it says push or pull, that means like on top. They stand up, you're behind them, you push them out of bounds. That is completely, in every sense of the imagination, stalling, right?
Or on your feet.
Well, no, here's why. Push. But here's why I don't like. Here's why I'm gonna say I disagree. I completely and utterly disagree on my feet, right? Because so many setups come off of pressure, right? I push into you, you push back, I hit a single, I hit a duck, I hit a snap down. So in order to get that pressure, or in order to get that setup, I need pressure, right? That's what I need, okay? And so when I say I take a bicep and a collar, boom, and I start pushing on you, and instead of ever giving me any resistance, you just back straight out of bounds. Now, Matt, that should be stalling on you. That should be stalling
Right,
you because you're not pressuring back, but it's getting called the other way. It's sometimes, some of the time, the guy who is pushing them out of bounds is getting called for stalling. And for me, that's complete insanity because there's a lot of guys who their main style is I push in, you push back, I use your pressure as my setup. That's good, smart wrestling. And if one guy is allowed by the referee to back straight out of bounds without putting any pressure back in, that's a huge issue. It changes the course of the match.
Which is so crazy to think about because for the last, I would say 3 or 4 out of the last 5 years, there's been NCAA rules proposal on the table that would implement a push out point for the offensive man that is initiating the push out. And all of a sudden they did a 180 and went the other way. Like if I push you out, now I'm the guy being penalized, which doesn't make sense. And again, it goes back to the hands in the face rule. It brings the ref into a larger role in the match.
It's so
like
dumb.
all of a sudden he's making the determination what the offensive man's intent is. Like, no, he's just trying to shove him out of bounds. He's not trying to generate any offense outside of just putting this guy on his heels and backing him out of bounds. But to your point, it's the defensive man's responsibility to return to center.
Yes,
so
100%.
You should be, as the ref, you should be actively promoting and communicating to the two wrestlers on the mat, work to center. But if I'm a smart defensive man, I'll just give up ground and go out of bounds, knowing that I could bait this guy into giving up a point, right?
Absolutely. And knowing that some wrestlers' best offense is off pressure. So if you don't give them that pressure, you take a lot of their offense away. But you shouldn't be allowed to do that. If you keep moving backwards, you should get called for stalling. That's how the sport works. So,
we constantly teach, right?
Yes.
Moving forward. We never say back up, retreat. That's not the nature of hand-to-hand combat. It's not the nature of the sport. We engage in physical combat.
Yeah, and so hopefully, we're like you're talking about the referees get together. They have these conference calls. They talk about how it's been called. I really, 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 really hope that that is something that is changed very quickly. I hope, especially at the high school level, because some of the high school refs, there needs to be an emphasis that if a guy goes straight back out of bounds and they're in a neutral position, he is stalling. There is no other way to call that. Absolutely no other way to call that.
And that's one of my problems. Like I know the National Coaches Association, Officials Association do a good job of trying to show clips of what simulates the right call. But a lot of these guys, they just don't have a good understanding of the sport of wrestling. A lot of these guys don't have a lot of experience as a competitor in the sport. They don't have a fundamental understanding of the inner workings of the techniques involved in the sport of wrestling. And so they're trying to make the correct call based on a certain scenario that's provided by their coaches, their officials association. Absolutely. And it's like, you can't make a blanket statement or say this is what the rule is and this is how you call it correctly every single time, because there's way too much ambiguity with some of these rules going on.
Yes, I agree. So, hey, let's get back into the matches. And I know we don't have a lot of time left today. I know later this week we're going to be able to hit these matches. And obviously, I don't really like talking about the rule stuff. I think for you and I, this is the beginning of the year stuff. We're still trying to grasp what these new changes are going to look like. And hopefully by the time we get to, say, December, we're not really talking about them anymore. Hopefully it's a foregone issue and we don't talk about it. So Luan over Pantaleo, I think, you said maybe they pull him out of red shirt. I don't, man. It's Pantaleo's senior year. He's been All-American a couple times. I looked at their lineup, obviously at Massa. They 65 Massa. They have someone really good. 74 Amin looked awesome in the All-Star. So I don't think there's any scenario in which all of those guys bump up a weight. So I think Luan stays a red shirt. But great job by him beating a very tough Alex Pantaleo 2 times.
2 times. Yeah, and I think for me, I mean, it goes into some of the things that you're trying to evaluate as a coach in the first month of the season. One is like, what's your lineup actually going to look like? What's the best shape of your lineup? And you're not really putting as much into results as kind of like takeaways. And with a guy like Luan, or even I'm sure it's going to come up in the coming weeks about should you pull Mason Paris out of redshirt at heavyweight, and what does that do for their individual team strength? So in the case of Luan, you've got a proven guy in Pantaleo. He's a couple-time All-American. He's a senior. He's been
ranked number 4 right now.
Ranked number 4. There's really no reason to really even have that consideration. It should only be cause for hope. Like, hey, when this guy graduates, we're not going to miss a beat. We got this guy, Luan. He's going to step in and perform at a high level. But it's also in this first month of the year, you're really looking and evaluating your red shirts and how they're jumping into competition. Are they jumping in at a high level? Would they be better served to, have a developmental year in red shirt? Or when you have a case like Michigan, who's got a legitimate chance of taking home a trophy.
They have a really good chance, man, because they have a good 25. They have an All-American returner at 33. Whoever their options are at 41 and 49, I know that those are not fully determined yet. I think they got a few good guys at both those weight classes. Very good options. All-American at 57, All-American at 65, All-American at 74. And so, when you're talking about Luan, you probably don't fit him in there. You keep him in Richard, but heavyweight, they don't have a top 20 guy at heavyweight. When you look at, say, 6 through 12 at heavyweight, I think there's kind of a soft spot. So, I think Mason Paris could possibly sneak in there to a lower placed AA somewhere and possibly boost your chances of getting a trophy. So, maybe you don't pull his redshirt right away, but definitely something that you're thinking about.
Yeah, if he can give you a baseline of results, obviously he came out and won his first open tournament this weekend. But if he repeats that and duplicates that performance over the next 3 weekends and wins several more open tournaments, I think Sean Bourmet and his coaching staff definitely has to look into, hey, we think this guy can place, and what does his placement potential look like in regards to the team race? Because that one extra All-American could be the difference between on the outside looking into the top 5, or even potentially you got to think Michigan.
If you guys aren't super familiar with the point scoring system at NCAAs, I can bring this up with the University of Missouri because I want to say this happened in 12 or 13. Man, if you're a 1 or 2 match or 3 match winner and you're not a bonus point guy, you're not scoring very many points. And you might be a 13th ranked guy in the country. You're just not scoring that many points. So, to what Matt is saying is that it's really, really important to get in that All-American round. Because if you're finishing your tournament before that, it's very likely you're not scoring very many points for your team. And so at that point, it might just be better that they leave him in red shirt. I think that's kind of what you're saying, right, Matt?
Yeah. So it all goes back to the philosophy of like, do you want to win now? Or are you better served? Would Mason Paris or Luan be better served sitting in red shirt for their individual development, or pulling them out of red shirt for the overall betterment of the team? And you can look at Penn State and what they've done over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, pulling guys out of red shirt mid-year. You can kind of point to that was a contributing factor for them winning the team title. So, yeah. So that's always that fine balance that you're discussing as a coaching staff. Like, do we want to win now, or do we want to preserve the growth and development of each individual? And that's a constant struggle. That's not a black or white discussion, but it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. So, Matt, I think we're going to call it a day there. We got a lot of the rules. We have so when we come back, we have so many matches to talk about. I know we're talking about Jay Nairman, Michael Carr. I know we're going to talk about Tristan Morin, Josh Albert, the Badgers versus Buffalo. We got some Daktronic stuff. I want to talk about Aaron Brooks, 170 for Oklahoma State, the Hokie. Oh man, there's so many things to talk about. And that's even I don't think we're going to even get into this week. The number one Devin Winston decommitted from UNC. That always brings up so many talking points. Man, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. So that was fun today. We will continue later this week. See you guys later. Hope you enjoyed it. Matt, have a great day.
Take care, Ben.
See ya.